All right, everyone. I'm Dr. Mike from Petersburg Family Chiropractic. I appreciate everyone being here, especially on what is tonight? Thursday night. Taking time out of your night and away from kids, spouses, whoever you got back at home. So I'm thankful for everyone for being here. So this is a presentation that I love to give because what we found is there's a lot of parents out there that are looking for something like this and they just don't know it, right? You've tried everything. You've gone the medical approach, maybe you've gone to essential oils, nutrition, functional medicine, OT, PT, and all those are great, but maybe there's still a missing piece of the puzzle that I'm hopefully going to present to you guys tonight. So, the perfect storm. Down here, this is PX Docs. This is actually, there's some articles in your folders that are from PX Docs. It's pxdocs.com. There's really good information in there, and PX essentially means pediatrics. There's a lot of really good pediatric information in there. Our clinic is affiliated with that website and with that group, so feel free to jump on there. You'll find articles on ADHD, seizures, autism, sensory, the whole spectrum, colicky, you name it, anything you can think of that a child might go through, it's on there. And it talks even about kind of how we do things as well. So we follow those protocols pretty well. So without further ado, we'll get started. Can everybody see okay? Everybody see okay? See the TV okay? Okay. All right, so you have three options really, mainly. Am I in your way?
No.
Okay. Like I said, traditional medical, right, which is important, but many of you have probably gone that route before. We talked to a lot of parents that would love to get their kids off of medications, would love to not go down the medical route. A lot of times that leads them to some kind of functional medicine or OTs, PTs, that kind of thing, which is also phenomenal. But many times people don't know about neurological chiropractic. So how we do chiropractic is completely different, just like I was talking to you about how we look at the nervous system and we can measure the nervous system, which is amazing. So it gives us a good baseline of what's going on with your kiddo, can we help, and what do we need to do going forward. So this is a really cool video, so you got to pay attention. Okay, you got to pay attention. The video will guide you.
Is 30.
You get a prize.
Did you see them?
Did you see the moonwalking bear? Just like that says, it's easy to miss something that you're not looking for. And when it comes into our field of chiropractic, two of the things that are the moonwalking bears, one is birth trauma or birth stress, the other, and that leads to subluxation, what we call subluxation, which is essentially misalignment of the spine that has an impact on the nervous system, which is why we measure that. And we'll get deep into that. So what is the perfect storm? The perfect storm really is a sequence of events that starts with some kind of trigger, usually some kind of stressful trigger. And many times it can start at prenatal period. So if you ladies have ever gone through a stressful pregnancy, that if you are stressed, do you think the baby's stressed? Big time, right? Birth stress. Sometimes I hesitate to call it birth trauma, right? But birth stress, birth trauma, that can be from any kind of medical intervention, C-section, forceps, vacuum extraction, you name it. That is where probably most stress comes from when it comes to your child and the issues they're having. We can almost always trace back to birth, almost always. that leads to stress, colicky child. And if you kind of notice the sequence that maybe some of your kids, they were colicky, but they grew out of it, right? Well, then they started getting ear infections. But they grew out of that. And then they started having all these other issues. And maybe you were just told, oh, they're just going to grow out of it. The problem is they never grow out of it. They just grow into something else. And that's the storm. Think of it like a snowball. It just continues to snowball until the issue gets addressed properly. And it just continues on down into where we got these sensory spectrum, hyperactive ADHD children that are stuck. Stress is just stuck in your kiddo. And then it leads to teenagers, depressed teens, and then this might even be some of you in here, just burnt out, stressed out adults, right? So this is the perfect storm sequence. And whenever parents bring kids in, we can almost always trace that back. I just did a phone consult for a mom of a 9-year-old, and we could trace that all the way back to that, engineer that sequence and trace it all the way back to birth. So this is a poster we have at the office, and we talk about this a lot, and we call this gas versus brake. So anyone ever heard of the autonomic nervous system? So the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic? The sympathetic part of our nervous system, that's the gas pedal. The parasympathetic is the brake, okay? They're both very important to have in our autonomic nervous system, but what happens is whether that's that prenatal stress we were talking about or that birth stress, birth trauma, it can subluxate the child's spine, and when that happens, that causes this nervous system bombardment and shifts their nervous system into sympathetic dominance. When that happens, that really shuts down the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And think of it this way. So the sympathetic, you probably heard of fight or flight, right? Sympathetic is fight or flight. So if I'm walking down a path and a dog comes running at me, my sympathetic nervous system kicks in to run as fast as I can, right? Or fight or whatever. That's our survival mode. The parasympathetic is the flip side of that. That's when we need to heal. That's when we need to rest. That's when we're thriving, okay? That's when we're in growth mode. You can't be in both at the same time. It's either one or the other. And if you're stuck in sympathetic, parasympathetics are shut off. And especially when you're a child, when you're from birth to about 3-4 months old, all you do is eat, sleep, and poop, right? And that's all parasympathetic. And that hangs on for a while. And as we even get into our teenage years, they still require a lot of sleep, right? So there's still a lot of parasympathetic that's super important. But again, if we're stuck in sympathetic dominance, all that is shut off to where that can affect digestion, that can affect sleep, that can affect a lot of things, right? Our ADHD kind of thing. So we'll come back to this, but you'll notice there's in our profession, we call it the 3 T's, and it's 3 different kinds of stress. And this affects everyone here as well as kids, but the first T is trauma, so that's physical stress. So physical stress can be birth trauma. It can be sitting at a desk all day. It can be getting into a car accident. Those are all physical traumas, and there's lots more, obviously. The second T is toxins. So what you put in your body can either be positive or negative, right? So you put a lot of bad stuff in your body. That can be a toxin. That's a stress on the nervous system. And then the third one are thoughts. So thoughts are a big one. That's emotional stress, psychological emotional stress. So again, whether that goes back to mom, if mom's having a real stressful pregnancy, that can affect the baby. And then obviously, you can imagine you could recall your life of all the different emotional stresses that you've had, right? Kids go through that too. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's a stem cell biologist, pretty smart guy. The function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all cells. So let's break that down a second. Perceive the environment. That's essentially situational awareness. One of the most important jobs, as that says, is to perceive the environment. What does that really look like? And that is, if maybe you've noticed that whenever your kids got back to school or daycare or something like that, maybe they got sick. It's part of that is your body adapting to the environment. Can it fight those infections? Can it fight those germs, whatever it may be, to perceive the environment? Okay, that can go many different directions. But then once the body and the nervous system perceives the environment, then it has to coordinate what happens next, right? So the child goes to school, it comes in contact with an illness, a germ, a virus, bacteria. Now the body needs to coordinate the behavior of what happens next. But why this is on here is because, again, if your child is stuck in sympathetic dominance from prenatal stress or birth trauma, this doesn't happen very well because it's stuck in survival mode versus thrive and healing. So I'll get kind of nerdy, and any other nerds in here? You can admit it. It's all right. This is a good place. Altered perception, which is subluxation. So when our spine is subluxated, it alters how the body perceives the environment, just like I was talking about. That leads to altered function. And anytime, and again, I'm always going to go back to that birth event, anytime that happens, it always starts off with a motor spectrum first, and then it just continues to perfect storm, snowstorm, goes into gut, immune, speech, social behavior, and emotional. It tends to almost always follow that path. Then healing happens God is awesome. He created us in a way to where we can adapt and compensate, but then also to heal, right? As long as there's no major interference that keeps us from that happening. But we heal in 3 simple steps. Autonomic nervous system first, okay? Back to that sympathetic, parasympathetic. Then motor, then the gut immune, okay? And I know, I talk to a lot of moms and they'll dive into this kind of stuff and they'll learn a lot more about like the vagus nerve and the gut and how the gut is like our second immune system, right? And all that's super important. But what happens is we have kids that are going through these struggles, and what are the first maybe a couple things we want to do is that we jump maybe into motor first. Maybe we take our child to a pediatric OT or PT, right? Which is awesome. Or we go to maybe a functional med doc, right? And that they want to help more naturally that way, which is super important as well. But if we skip over the autonomic nervous system and jump into those first, those other 2 steps don't really get the benefit, the powerful punch, unless the autonomic nervous system is really roaring first. So this was just some Harvard studies. The interaction of genes and experiences. So think of experiences essentially like perception of the environment, okay? Experiences shape the developing brain, okay? Although genes provide the blueprint for information, it's really these circuits that are repeat experiences, repeat events that lead to how our body perceives stress, how our nervous system is functioning. And then if you go down to the bottom, toxic stress, so think of all the stress that our kids' bodies can be bombarded with, can weaken that. And it leads to learning, behavioral, physical, and mental health challenges. All because the body is just shifted to this sympathetic dominance. This is a really important slide. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. But like right over here, this first year, so this is prenatal right here. Hopefully you guys can see my laser.
No,
and then
on the wall.
is it? Oh, it's reflecting over there. Okay. So this is the first year of life, the first 12 months. As you can see, they did really good studies on how important that first year is for child development. So whether it's the sensory neural pathways, the language pathways, higher cognitive functions, all that is important that first year. That's how important that first year is. But again, I'll keep going back to this, that birth trauma kind of flattens those curves to where they are adapting in the wrong direction. So we're born healthy, hopefully, and we're supposed to go down this path. But whenever we're subluxated when we're born, we veer off and start heading this way in a direction we don't want to go, into this storm. And then over here, this is, again, parts of the brain, the neurons. When you look through it through a microscope, essentially, these are healthy neurons, and these are neurons after some toxic stress. And then you can see just the breakdown of the neurons. And these need to fire together so that the brain and the rest of the body communicate effectively. This has poor communication. These are neurons from, and we'll dive a little deeper into the brain, so hopefully you got your thinking cap on tonight. But the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, and we'll dive into that a little bit. And that really, I think, helps tie into maybe why your kids maybe have emotional issues. Maybe they're throwing tantrums all the time and just having all different kinds of issues. So the little algorithm is essentially, when we look at kids, like how much stress is there, how much is present. The 3 T's, how much trauma has there been, how much toxins have there been with the child, and then more of the thoughts, right? The emotional stress. How much stress is there? Whenever we do a phone consultation, do the intakes, we can gather all the information to really see what's going on. So how much stress, and then when did the stress occur? So if we have a 6-month-old come in, for example, a 6-month comes in, and it's like, well, a 6-month-old, how much stress could they possibly have? If it happened at birth, their whole life, right? It's their whole life. And 6 months may not sound like a long time, especially in our adult years, but when it's their whole life, so whether it's a 2-year-old, a 9-year-old, a teenager, it's potentially their whole life. So we use that to figure out, okay, how much care is needed to help restore the neurological balance. I'm sure you've heard it, you can't, if it happened, you can't fix it overnight, right? It didn't happen overnight, you can't fix it overnight. So, my good friend, Dr. Tony Ebel, the spine serves as more than a bunch of ligaments and bones. A lot of people think us chiropractors are just bone crunchers, right? It's so much more than that. It is a living, breathing, neurological communication superhighway. Literally, the brain is sending signals back and forth, sensing the environment, trying to figure out what's going on. That is vitally important in brain to body and back again, communication, coordination, and control of every other tissue, cell, and system. So not some, but every tissue, right? This little chart right here, it's actually in your folder. Now, I see some of you already got it out. This is really cool to where, for example, so here's our head, here's our upper cervical spine, which is some of the most common areas for birth trauma. You can see how you come across what that area controls, including the vagus nerve, and then possible side effects because of that. And you can look down and all the color coordination there, and it's very interesting, so feel free to check that out. So subluxation equals stress stuck on. So whenever we get subluxated, and again, I'll if you still not really understand what that is, I'll dive into that here in just a minute. But whenever the vertebrae get misaligned, they get fixated, they get stuck, it holds that stress into the system. So the stress is literally stuck inside of our children, and it needs to be released. It needs to be let go. And the nervous system just doesn't know what to do. So there's going to be a spelling test at the end. You ready? So 5 Ds in sequence, dyskinesia. Dyskinesia is what happens initially. When there's a stress, abnormal alignment and movement. So whenever, I'll say for example, when C1, the very top one up here called the atlas, when that subluxates, when it misaligns, it gets stuck and it quits moving. And that's a big deal because right up here is the brain stem, still part of the brain up here. The vagus nerve comes down through there. If that's not moving well, this is like the master circuit breaker switch for the whole body. It's a big, big deal. You've heard if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Starting up there, that's a big one. So dyskinesia, abnormal movement happens first from the stress. Then it leads to disafferentation, which is abnormal sensory input. So as you guys are watching this, you're picking up my voice, you're picking up sound, sight, all the different senses are coming in. And to a child or to anyone that's struggling with this, the information coming in is sloppy, it's staticky, it's not coming in very well, right? Maybe for some of you got kids that it's like when you try to talk to them, if you're able to get it out of them, it's like someone screaming into their ears. It's like the information coming in is very unclear. So abnormal sensory input. Dysautonomia, and we'll dive into this a little bit later too. Imbalance of the autonomic nervous system is what I was talking about before. The sympathetic versus the parasympathetic. Okay, and again, I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a big one. And then dysfunction. That leads to dysfunction of other systems in our body, whether that's dysfunction of our endocrine system, which controls all of our hormones, to digestive system, cardiovascular system. You think of all the systems, the nervous system controls them all. And then dyskinesis, this is essentially ADHD, right? Just abnormal output. And the really, really cool thing is that, number one, as chiropractors, I can feel this. I know how to find this. Dysautonomia, we can measure that as well with a scan that we do, and I'll show you that in a sec. And then dyskinesis, this is a scan that we do as well, which can measure energy output. And we can see what's going on there, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so this is a video that's very important. Okay, if you're squeamish, it really doesn't show that much, but if everyone's done eating, it really doesn't show that much. Okay, I'll just warn you. But this is a super important video. This is our moonwalking bear. Okay, remember the moonwalking bear is birth trauma, and then that leads to subluxation. So this is a healthy, normal C-section video. Okay, I'll just end with that. I'll let you watch. Yeah. They've measured a range in C-section deliveries from 30 to 40 pounds of tension on the baby's neck. That's a lot, right? I forgot to bring my baby. We have a little baby model, baby doll that we keep at the clinic. And imagine if you brought your child into me, and it was a baby, and I grabbed him by the head and picked him up just like that. Like, you guys would bulldozer me, right? I mean, but that's only the body's weight, 8, 10, 12 pounds. That's 30 to 40 pounds of tension on the baby's neck. That is birth trauma for sure. So that's C-section. Vaginal deliveries, not as stressful, but can be depending on, yeah, that can be 20 to 30 pounds, but that depends on how the baby presents, right? Whether, yeah, right? Did you guys experience with that?
Yes.
So, and then obviously you throw in forceps, vacuum delivery, that kind of thing. That amps it up even more. So, moonwalking bear. Oop, don't want to watch that again. And again, nothing against C-section. I think it's overly used. I think it's necessary whenever it's necessary, right? Most of you probably didn't know how stressful that was, right, on the baby's neck. Okay. Don't worry, don't try to read all of that. But essentially, a somatic dysfunction is subluxation. And what they've measured, they've done a lot of different studies of this, but this one's a good one, to where they measured babies after being born, do they have subluxation? Out of this study, 99 out of 100 had some form of dysfunction in their neck. 99 out of 100. And that was normal, healthy birth. That was a normal, healthy birth that came from that. This is, again, don't worry about this. In your folder, there's a page of references in there for different studies, so feel free to check those out. Let's jump into the brain a little bit and dysautonomia, okay? So remember, dysautonomia is essentially issues with the autonomic nervous system, dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system, which is the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So it's the gas pedal or brake pedal. Is your kid stuck on the gas pedal, or is there a good balance, right? Is there a good, healthy balance? We're going to break down a couple of these. So the amygdala, so maybe you've heard of the amygdala, but essentially that's where our emotions are at. That's the seat of the emotions. The problem is, again, this gets just turned on. The amygdala gets turned on. So here's our brain, here's our head. Right down here is the very top of the spine. This is that atlas I was talking about. So it sits right here. When that atlas gets subluxated, or even C2 called the axis, when those get subluxated, it creates this inflammation bombardment that goes up into this area, and that can affect many of these areas, and the three here I'm going to talk about, that essentially gets the amygdala jammed up. It gets it turned on. That's why, again, we can have kids that just have a lot of emotional struggles, right? Meltdowns constantly, that kind of thing. Fear, anxiety. Got any kids that have any fear and anxiety? Any issues there? Yeah. They probably don't sleep too well either, do they? Yeah. Right. Hippocampus. This is for factual learning, memory, situational awareness. Remember, situational awareness is perception of the environment. So three things we always try to teach our kids: work ethic, communication, and situational awareness, right? So some of that can be taught, but some of it is also ingrained in us. How do we perceive the environment? How does our nervous system react to that? But when the amygdala is turned on, when it won't shut off, the hippocampus can't turn on. So then we don't have good situational awareness. We can't perceive our environment very well. That becomes a huge problem. Then we're just not learning. Our memory is not very good. Thirdly is a prefrontal cortex. Kind of the same thing. When our brain, when our body is locked into this sympathetic dominance, that gets turned off. So that's a lot of higher cognitive function, whether it's attention, which obviously you can think of like ADHD, inhibition, just control, self-discipline. So that gets turned off. And again, it's just a whole level of sympathetic dominance. The parasympathetics are shut down just because of this chronic inflammation up here. Okay, gas versus brake poster. This is Dr. Bruce Lipton. He said, you can't be in growth and protection at the same time. Growth, that's your parasympathetic nervous system. Protection is your survival, your sympathetic. Okay, it's designed to protect us. The parasympathetic is designed to help us grow. And so you can see down here, unfortunately I don't believe we have any of those. Well, I guess you do in the folder there. On the left side of the folder is a picture of that, where you look down at the bottom. Whenever you got the brake pedal in the middle, brake pedal versus gas pedal, you can see how that leads to all these potential issues down here, which is all tied up into that perfect storm. All right, let's dive into the vagus nerve for a sec. And remember, the vagus nerve, like I said, that's a really cool thing. It's one of the only nerves it's one of the cranial nerves. We have 12 cranial nerves, 12 nerves that are in our brain. Most of them stay up into our brain to help with hearing, with eyesight, that kind of thing. This one comes down the spine, goes down and controls, it's pretty much like our parasympathetic nerve, controls a lot of our higher functions, whether it's breathing, digestion, that second part of the immune system, so to speak. When our vagus nerve gets essentially dysregulated, with the parasympathetic is shut down, then we can have a lot of these issues. And like I said, we can measure that through what we call HRV, heart rate variability. And that shows us, number one, are you dominant sympathetic versus parasympathetic? And what's the autonomic energy level of your child? So if the energy level is super low and they're exhausted, their nervous system exhausted, their autonomic nervous system is exhausted, generally if you can imagine, if you're stuck in sympathetic dominance, survival mode for years, you just get exhausted eventually, right? And then you just have a completely exhausted nervous system. And then that's whenever we can get those, really lead to a lot of depressed teenagers. And anybody have teenagers in here? Couple. So, good study, vagus nerve, sensory processing disorder. Don't worry about that big top paragraph here, but essentially the results indicated low parasympathetic, okay? Low parasympathetic, which is going to make the sympathetic seem high, okay? Low parasympathetic, and they're essentially stimulating the vagus nerve to see how it responds. In addition to poor adaptive behavior. Again, if your autonomic nervous system, you have dysautonomia, your body is not adapting to its environment. It's not perceiving its environment very well. That's the most important thing. Even like you go back to flu season, COVID, anything, a lot of the issues were internal. Like always focus on strengthening the host. Like our body is the host, right? If we can focus on that, keep it as strong as possible, whenever it comes to flu season or body comes in contact with viruses or bacteria, it's going to have the best fighting chance no matter what. Doesn't mean you don't get sick, but maybe it means it's going to kick it a lot quicker because of that. But if our parasympathetic nervous system is dysregulated, if it's shut down, that's not going to happen. That's where we see a lot of chronic sickness with our kids. Brain gut before gut brain kind of goes back to another slide I was talking about, to where we have kids that have these issues, and sometimes what do we do first is we focus on the gut. Or maybe we focus on nutrition. We focus on going to functional med specialists. Again, super important, but it starts in the brain first. It starts in the nervous system first. And they did a cool study where they actually electrically stimulated the vagus nerve, which means they turned on the parasympathetic nervous system, and it reduced intestinal inflammation, which is really cool. Now, honestly, I wasn't really aware of this until I put this presentation together. Vagotomy, that's essentially dissecting the vagus nerve, cutting it. They do that a lot for, I guess, if you have chronic acid reflux. I don't know if anybody ever had experience with that before. I'm just curious. So, and that leads to the opposite. That leads to increased intestinal inflammation. It's not what we want for sure. Reverse effect. All right. My favorite part, let's get into some stories here. This is my buddy Oliver. You see the dude in the back, that's Justice back there. He loves to come in and play with Justice. I think he likes that more than getting adjusted, but he gets Justice time. So the very top, so these are pictures of the scans. These are the output pictures of the scans. The top ones were his initial scans, and the bottom ones were progress scans. So let me try to walk you through this the best I can. So the first one, those are the HRV, heart rate variability. That's looking at his vagus nerve. That's looking at the sympathetic versus parasympathetic. If you look at it, this side is sympathetic, this side is parasympathetic. You can see he's the white dot right there. He's stuck on sympathetic right there. And it's a little bit low. Ideally, we want to be in the green. He's a little bit low. I've seen a lot worse, but he's much low. And he's stuck on that sympathetic side. Rescan, almost a bullseye right there. And this is, I just do adjustments. This is just adjustments. This is thermography. So this one I need to explain a little bit, because this one, when he first came, he doesn't sit still very well, right? Like maybe a lot of your kids don't sit still very well. So we just try to get the best scan that we can. So this first picture, he couldn't sit still very well. So we had to do what's called a segmental, and so we couldn't do every level of his spine, okay? But it did pick up a couple areas. Green means essentially mild heat difference, so that gives me direction of where I need to work at. Rescan, what I love and I need to explain on this one is that he was finally able to sit still. That alone is a huge win, that he could just sit still and get scanned. So we got to do every level. Still had some red spots showing up there, but the biggest win was just that he could sit still on there, and that was amazing. It's still, and I'll be frank. I mean, I'm never looking for perfection, right? We're not trying to cure anything. We're just trying to help things get better. We're trying to help the body work better, help the nervous system work better. This is EMG. This is our third scan called EMG. This is looking at muscle tone, which is another way of saying essentially nervous system energy. This right here says energy index. His was an 870. Normal for a kiddo his age is like 200. So his was 870, through the roof. We're still working with him, and he's doing amazing, but his energy on this progress came down to 605. That's like a 30% improvement. And mom said less stimming controls his emotions better. Less gut inflammation and regular bowel movements. Those are some common things that we hear And one of the, she had come in one day and told us a story where most of the time when they would go into a social gathering, because he has autism, he'd go into a social gathering, and he would just kind of cling on to her. Like he didn't want to have anything to do with anybody else. He would just kind of stick close to mom. But then after a couple months of getting adjusted, like they went to this, I think it was a fair at school, and he just kind of took off and started socializing with his friends. And she said it was just the most amazing thing. That was so much fun. I love to hear those kind of stories. All right, this is Bentley. This is an ADHD case. So my man, he's about 13 at that time. This is, again, HRV. So pre and post. His HRV energy was pretty low. Got him up into the green to where he's thriving really well. And you can see this is his EMG, again, measuring energy expenditure. That was kind of that last one of the 5Ds, the dyskinesis, which is that energy output. So here he had just a lot of energy output. And now you can see it's mostly white like it's supposed to be. And still just a couple areas left that we're still adjusting. And that has led to stomach doesn't hurt as much anymore, not as whiny, and attitude is better. Who would like some of that? Anybody? And then sleeping lots better. That's the sleeping part is one that we hear a lot with most kids. That's usually one of the things that we hear first. We always call like these softer signs. And one of the softer signs is that my kid is sleeping better. And many times they're pooping better, and they have just these better bowel movements, which is again part of that parasympathetic nervous system, right? It's in charge of that part. There's we got some. I don't know if we ever got any, but there's like these little onesies we can give we'll give out little onesies for kids, and it has a big pile of poop on it, and it says my chiropractor helps me poop, and so we love that. We can get one for adults too, I'm sure. All right, so this is Evan. Now this is actually, I was given permission to use this story. Evan's not a patient of mine, but this was in a documentary called Doctored. And Evan is a great story. You can see his EMG. He's got a bit of red in there, some dysfunction going on. I'm going to play the video. This is a pre-video, pre-chiropractic video, okay? See if you can pick up on. See the black eye too, even had some falls. So Evan here, you can see just not making great eye contact, not communicating well, some speech delays, you can even see some emotional stuff going on there. This is Evan about 4 months later, and you can even see this is a progress questionnaire, which we try to really measure objective progress, and we also like to measure subjective progress. And so we have parents fill these questionnaires out about every month, and so we can measure good subjective progress. And this one mentions talking like crazy and following directions, right? Following directions. So let's watch this video and just see the difference. It's so night and day. Even eye contact. There's just a light about him that's just awesome. So I think you guys get the picture there. Such a great story, and this is always a good story because it took per this, it took about 4 months to get there, right? So then you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is that worth it to go from where he was to where he is now and to have that kind of interaction? Evan, the pre, and there's a slide on this in a second. There's 3 different categories of perfect storm, essentially, and Evan was a drunken bull, okay? And I'll talk about that in a second. So this is Jackson. So within a couple months, Mom and Dad noticed some amazing changes. Meltdowns were occurring less and less. A meltdown wouldn't ruin his whole day. Calm him, even after he gets, it doesn't mean you don't get upset, right? But he could get calmed down much better. And this is the one I love too. He's doing better with therapy, right? We've heard that before many times, even talking to other pediatric chiropractors that work with maybe pediatric OTs or PTs, that the therapy just does so much better whenever there's that foundation of the autonomic nervous system that's set into place. And the OTs and PTs can see the biggest difference as well. That one's, that's huge. I love those blue glasses. All right, so here's those 3 categories I was talking about. The far left, that's the drunken bull. This is the EMG scans, so we can look at that energy output, right? So his energy in that, when he's in that car seat, he's just kind of, like it's called, like drunk, right? He's just kind of everywhere. His energy is all over the place. Even more kind of lacking, right? His energy is super low, and we can measure that to where all that white in the middle, even some yellow. Over here is raging bull. That's kind of the opposite, right? Raging bull is a child that's the true definition of ADHD, just a lot of energy. You can't get them to settle down. And then this is a mix. Sometimes we see kiddos where it's kind of the nervous system is confused. It doesn't know what to do. One day it's a raging bull, next day it's a drunken bull. And again, we can see that with the scans. So we can get a baseline, and then we can do progress slides going forward, progress scans, to see how his nervous system is improving. So this is a little man from grade school. You can see again the progression of the HRV on the bottom left, and how it continues to get better, almost up into the green, that white dot, and then the EMG as well. So raging bull, really settling down, much better there. And this is the before and after. Emotional outbursts, sensory processing challenges, separated from regular classes, suspended from school. Afterwards, better emotional regulation, all regular education classes, straight A student, comfortable in school. Now this is night and day. Obviously not all kids go through that, right? But improvement, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, that's a huge change. So great case of someone in grade school. So here are some action steps. So in the beginning, my goal was to hopefully communicate 3 different things. Number 1, maybe give you guys some hope, right? Maybe you didn't know there was a different answer out there. You've tried the medical route, you've tried functional medicine, you've tried a lot of different things, and maybe they've helped, but just not where you want to be. So the third thing I wanted to throw out there is some help, right? So we love helping. It's our mission to help moms, to help parents, dads. I'm not going to leave you out. And that's why we're here, because maybe most of you had no idea that this kind of thing was out there, that chiropractic can help with kids, that even chiropractic was this nervous system thing. We thought that the spine was a bunch of bones and ligaments, and we're just bone doctors, right? It's not that way at all. And so my advice is to keep looking for hope, answers, and help as well, right? I'll never say that we're the end-all be-all. We're just maybe a missing piece of the puzzle, right? So there's a lot of other good stuff out there, but what I would recommend is starting with at least getting chiropractic, getting the foundation going of your child, whether that's the autonomic nervous system, getting potentially that parasympathetic nervous system kicked on. This is an example of a little one getting scanned. So action step for tonight is your option. So schedule your child's consult, the scans, And the scans are, sometimes we get this question is like, what is that? What are those scans like? Does it hurt? Can my child, it's not going to be able to sit through that? They will. We've scanned many, many kids, and Jamie and Ashley is actually new on our team, and she's learning to do scans. They will, and because these girls do an amazing job to work with the kids. But I will say this, because there's a slide at the end, is that if your child won't sit still for a scan, that is a scan. That's a test right there. And so, okay, I put in my notes, they wouldn't sit still, a lot of energy. We start care, then down the road, they can sit down for a scan. I don't care what the scan looks like at that point, honestly. They sat down for the scan. That's a huge win right there. And so how we do things, we do a consult. And a lot of times with our Perfect Storm kids, I like to do a phone consult first. You know, as you can imagine, maybe if your child has a lot of energy, it's probably good for us to talk on the phone first versus try to have a face-to-face conversation with the kids running around. So phone consults are super handy. And then we do the scans. Scans only take about 15 minutes, okay? Then that's day one. Then we have you come back for day two, which is the report of findings, okay? Report of findings is I lay out the scans, I go over them as deep as I can, answer any questions that you have. Then based on the scans, based on your intake, the kids' intake, based on the consultation, I come up with a care plan. And the care plan is probably one of the most important things that we can do, okay? Like I said, I'll be up front, it's never a quick fix. It's a process and it takes time, and the care plan is part of that. Whether that depends on how many visits per week to how long that needs to be. Because your child has momentum going in the wrong direction, we need momentum going in the right direction, right? So this is our 3-step clinical process. So listen, dive deep into your child's case history. Okay, like I said, that's part of that, the consultation, the intake. If you guys decide to do an intake, go through that process. Be as thorough as possible. I did a phone consult this morning, and Mom had paragraphs on the intake for me to read and to give the story. She was so excited just to tell the story of what her child went through and what he's going through. Then we do the scans. Like I said, the scans are amazing. There's no harm going on. It gives me a lot of important information. And then day two is report of findings, and then we go through the care plan. And then if you choose, it's your choice to choose to accept the recommendation, the care plan, then we start with the adjustments. What we have decided for everyone that just came tonight, I got to play my salesman tonight, okay? So usually for a phone consultation, it's $50. For a new patient visit, it's $120. So, but what we'll do, since you showed up tonight, you gave us your time, the $50 consultation will be complimentary, and then the $120 new patient exam will be $40. So essentially $40 for everything. We want to make it so easy for you guys to come in to where even if you're like, I just want to get my kid scanned and just to see what that looks like. And if you want to just like, I'm just going to wait and we're going to look at some other things, that's totally cool. So I would recommend at least coming in, getting scanned, see what that looks like. The scans give me 3 things. Number 1, it tells me, can we help, right? Can we help? 2, essentially how bad is it? How bad is that stress stuck in your child? And then 3, where is it at? So it'll tell me, okay, the stress is really stuck up here, stress is stuck down here. Those are the areas I need to adjust, and this is how you need to adjust it. So there's a method to the madness to that, so to speak. How long does it take? Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but the really, really interesting thing is if you look at the age down here at the bottom, this blue line is essentially the brain's ability to change, the brain's ability to adapt. Obviously, the younger you are, the quicker the brain and the body can adapt, which can be good or bad. So if it was a healthy birth, everything was amazing, nervous system is rocking, our children are going to adapt in a healthy way. But if we're born with birth trauma, we got subluxation, we're stuck in sympathetic dominance, then we adapt this other path, and that's where it leads to the perfect storm. That's the direction we don't want to go. You know, you've ever heard of you can't teach old dog new tricks? It's true. It's true. We get down to here to where our ability to adapt and perceive the environment happens quite a bit. So amount of effort, the amount of kids get better, I mean, so quick. It's amazing. It is amazing. Versus us adults where we just have these chronic issues going on, right? I love taking care of my adults too, but kids are amazing. How will you ever get my sensory spectrum ADHD kid to sit still? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I'll adjust kids at the train table. I'll adjust them on the floor. I'll adjust them on mom. I'll adjust them on dad. I'll adjust them wherever they let me. And a lot of kids will lay on the table over here like Willow. Sometimes I bring out the big guns. Olivia here, she'll come and help me adjust. And I got all my future chiropractors that I'm grooming. That's Justice again. He's the trained green leader. So that's it, guys. If you are interested in working with us, or if you have more questions, inside your folder is a half sheet. It's a piece of paper that's half. Fill that out. Give it to Jamie, and she'd be happy to get you started. Okay. Now, I want to make time also for questions. If you have questions that you're okay asking in a group, we can do that. And then, or one-on-one, we can do one-on-one as well. Okay?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So all of this